Do you remember the first time that you asked your parents to tell you the story of the day you were born? Or if you're adopted, the story of what it was like when you came home for the first time to your new family? Or if you're a parent, do you remember when your child asked you that question? How did you tell that story? Or if you heard it, what did you hear? What was it like? What characters were involved? And even more, what does it mean to the person who's telling the story? Could it have been a story about how your family waited for a very, very, very long time for a child, and all of a sudden that child appeared and nothing was ever the same? Could it have been a story about trying to get to the hospital on time and not being entirely sure if you were going to make it? Could it have been a story about how long it took for a child to be born, maybe all day and all night? Maybe there were some characters in the story, the people that came to the hospital to wait with anticipation to find out what the baby's name would be, and if everybody was going to be okay after the baby was born. And then there are the stories of bringing the baby home for the first time, and whether the baby slept or didn't sleep, or whether the baby cried or was quiet. And maybe stories too of other characters that entered the house to help the family adapt to having this new member at home. Have you ever noticed that sometimes when different people tell the same story, the details can vary a little bit? Maybe mom remembers particular moments of that night when she gave birth. A dad or another parent might remember completely different details. The aunts and cousins and friends that showed up, well, they remember something different too. Nowadays, we can go back to Facebook and check for the pictures and see who wrote what. But I'm pretty sure still those stories will be different. And I think there's a reason for that. Because when we tell these stories, we're not so much concerned about the facts. This baby was born at North Community Hospital at 9:30 p.m. on December the 24th and weighed 8 pounds and 4 ounces. And its name was Jan or Pat or Mike or Finn. That's what you put on a birth certificate. But when we tell the stories of the day we entered our families, we're telling each other what we mean to each other. What it means to be a parent. What it means to be adopted into a family. What it means to recognize those who love you. What it means to be a family. When you remember those stories, what do they mean to you? What stands out most when you tell the story? That is, in a way, after all, what we're kind of doing tonight as we tell the story of the day that Jesus was born. Sometime after people got to know him and eventually came to believe in him, they started asking questions like, well, what happened the night he was born? Who were his parents? When did it happen? And most of all, what did it mean? And if we want to find him today, when we tell that story, where do we look? And so tonight we tell a story perhaps as Mary told it. She's the main character in this story. And she tells about shepherds and angels and so on. Joseph, he has another story, other details. But let's stick with Mary's story. We hear a story of parents who know the baby's coming but can't get to any place safe for that child to be born. There's no hospital. And no one that they know has a room to let them in. They might be in a little danger, and it's a difficult time. We may know that Jesus is special, but no one then did, and his birth was anything but special. It was difficult and hard on his family. Could that mean if we were looking for Jesus today, we might look to a family in need, a family in difficulty, and find there the Christ who needs our help. The night Jesus was born, angels appeared to people that were frightened when they saw them. And the first words they said were, "Do not be afraid." Could that mean that when we tell the story of Jesus, we're invited also not to be afraid ever of anything because of this news of peace and joy and justice that Jesus brings? Those same angels sang an incredible song of thanksgiving and joy to God because of the birth of that child. Could it be that when we rejoice and sing also, that same God is present among us as well? And when we do it, that same Jesus is present with us? And let's not forget those shepherds. Nobody in that time would want shepherds showing up on their doorstep. They stank. They lived with sheep. They lived on the outside of town. You wouldn't show your new baby to them. And yet, the night Jesus was born, who came to greet that child? Who brought the news of who this child really was, perhaps surprising even that child's parents? It was the shepherds. Could that suggest to us that as we tell the story of Jesus, we're invited to reconsider our attitudes about people we know or people we don't? Even to admit we were wrong so we can receive their good news. We might discover new friends, a new presence of Jesus among us. When you hear that story of the night Jesus was born, what seems most important to you? Who stands out for you? And when you put the story of your own birth or your child's birth or adoption together with that story of the day Jesus was born, do you notice any similarities? Are those stories alike at all? I ask because I think there is a connection. Because I think when we tell our stories to each other, we're telling the story of how God continues to come into the world and be with us. That our stories about helping each other in difficulty, and our stories about not being afraid, even when it seems scary, our stories about singing songs of joy and giving thanks when good things happen, our stories about letting go of attitudes that are no good for us, that keep us from being friends, those are all stories about how God is coming into the world now with us. I wonder if this Christmas night or tomorrow around the table, as we share our gifts, we might also share again those stories of the day we were born, or the day we became a family, or the day we came home. And discover in telling those stories that same God present among us who was born long ago in Bethlehem.